Hey everyone, Jess Bealer here. Thank you for allowing me to speak into your life and into your ministry. I am just so grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today about re-engaging your volunteer base. The original plan was for me to be there in person, and obviously this is a recording. I'm having to have a small medical procedure done that was unexpectedly scheduled, but I am still just as excited about sharing with you some ideas that will help you to re-engage your volunteer base and to start recruiting again. You know, it was a very quick offboarding at the beginning of COVID, but it has been a slow onboarding. And so I want to just, again, give you some ideas, very, very practical things that you can do in your ministry, that you can work on both on your ministry and in your ministry, that will help you to fill those volunteer rosters and see better engagement in serving. Let's get started. I want to start by just making a distinction here. The first thing is I think we need to distinguish between the difference between recruiting and onboarding. Recruiting are intentional steps that you take to increase visibility and attraction to volunteering. So these are the things that we are doing to get people interested in volunteering. So we're going to talk mostly about that. What I don't want us to confuse recruiting with, though, is onboarding. Onboarding is very, very logistical. It's just a system. It is your systematic processes to take someone from I'm interested in volunteering to being like happily settled on a thriving, healthy volunteer team. So onboarding, those are the systems that you use. Now you have to do both well. Essentially, you need to have great recruiting processes, but you also need to have a very clean, streamlined, and very aligned onboarding system so that everyone is being onboarded in a very intentional way. Right now with onboarding, a lot of times, someone shows interest and we get their contact information and we pass it along to the ministry leader. And that's our onboarding process. That's very, very subjective. Everyone is going to do it different. Every ministry is going to onboard them different. So we do need to find some alignment in onboarding. And that is very important. So if you don't do that currently, then I would probably suggest that you sit down as a staff or as a team and you decide exactly what your onboarding process is going to look like. And so I'll mention a little bit about that at the end, but mostly today I want to focus on recruiting. Okay, again, recruiting, intentional steps to increase visibility and attraction to your ministry. Okay, so here's a couple of like really practical things that will help you and some practical steps that you can take. First off, when it comes to recruiting, every ministry leader in your church needs to know who they need and they need to be able to communicate it. So what do I mean by that? You need to have a needs and haves document or form or something that they would fill out. Everybody needs to know who they need, and then they need to be able to communicate it. So instead of just saying, how many volunteers do you need? And someone saying, oh, I need a lot of volunteers. Every ministry leader should be able to say, well, I need 7 volunteers. I need 1 at check-in. I need 1 at the guest services desk during the 9:30 hour. I need, I have a group of greeters. They are 75% males. I'd love to have 4 that are female, like knowing exactly what you need at what service time in what area. And then also being able to communicate that. Knowing what you need enables you to be able to communicate it. So I would suggest doing some kind of needs or haves form, or having all of your, ministry department heads create a needs and haves forms and let you know, this is the number of unique individuals that I currently have engaged in serving in my ministry. And this is the number that I need. And very specifically, this is exactly what I need. If they know, then they're going to be recruiting for those positions, and they're going to be able to communicate it. So a needs and haves form is really important to just set you up for success. That's kind of like infrastructure for successful recruiting. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is to increase your visibility. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times we walk when people are coming into church. I know I do it sometimes. We walk by volunteers and we don't even take mental note that, oh, there's somebody serving over there. And that's a good portion of the people that are in your congregation that are doing that. They're literally just walking back by volunteers. It's not even occurring to them, oh, the reason I'm drinking this coffee is because someone came in early and made the coffee for me. Oh, the reason that someone was opening the door is because that person got here early enough to have a team meeting, and who was going to stand at the door, and and then they opened the door for me. They're not even taking note of the fact that there are people that are serving. They're not also taking note of that they could be one of those people. And so it's really important that we increase visibility of volunteerism. Now, what do I mean by that? First off, you need to talk about volunteerism a lot from your stage. Now, I am not saying that we beg for volunteers. Nobody wants to be on a sinking ship, right? Like nobody's jumping on the Titanic. So if we stand on our stage and we beg people for volunteers, we tell them of the great need that we have, everybody's going to be like, oh no, I know what happens if if I sign up to volunteer, I'm going to be, I'm going to have this huge load. They desperately need people. And so, it's going to be required that I be here every single week. And if I'm not here, it's going to be, a problem. And so we don't ever want to do that. We don't ever want to convey desperation from the stage, but we do want to increase visibility of volunteerism from the stage. So what does that look like? It means that we just talk about volunteers. We praise them when they do something great. So maybe, once a month you have a volunteer appreciation where you single out one volunteer from different areas of your ministry. You bring them on stage, you brag on them, and you give them something meaningful, maybe a gift or, even just a hug, and just bragging on them from the stage is completely fine. But, you're not asking anyone to volunteer. You're just bragging on your volunteer. But in that moment, you are increasing visibility of volunteerism. Another way to do this is like during your giving moment. You could just have the person that is doing that giving moment say something along the lines of, you may not know this, but when you give here at the church, you are giving to our children's ministry and our student ministry, and the volunteers that we have serving in those ministries. They are so grateful for you because you allow them to minister and to resource parents and families well. Again, you're just talking about children's ministry volunteers or student ministry volunteers. You're not begging anyone to do anything, but you are reminding people, oh, there's more going on than meets the eye, right? Like there are volunteers who are serving right now as we speak. So that's another way. So I would just say get comfortable talking about volunteerism from the stage. And again, not necessarily a campaign to get volunteers, more just along the lines of just talking about volunteerism as a priority of your church and how important that is. So the one thing that I would say about stage mentions is that you're going to need to create a schedule for it. Because what happens is if we don't systemize something, if we don't say, okay, this is the standard that we're going to have, we're going to talk about it 2 times a month, or we're going to talk about it every single week in this way, here's our schedule, then we sell out to something for a very short season. So for the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, we're going to be all about volunteers, and we're going to be talking about it as a priority. And then we start to get some volunteers, things start to look a little better, and then it slowly, drifts back to what it was. And so if we create a plan where, okay, this is what we're going to do every single month from now until infinity with volunteers, as far as visibility of volunteerism, then we actually are able to execute that in a systematic way. So increase your visibility from your stage. Make sure that you're presencing volunteerism from the stage. I would also encourage you to presence volunteerism on your social media. Most of our social media accounts are very inward focused. A lot of times we talk about, a quote from the sermon or an event that is going on, whatever it may be, but it's all things that are happening within the church or that the church itself is doing. I would encourage you to be a little bit more outwardly focused. Mention a volunteer and then tell their story. What will end up happening is that person will comment, they may share it to their wall, and then other people will share it, like the mom of the volunteer will probably share it, or the aunt of the volunteer, or they'll comment on it. And then not only are you increasing the visibility of your church, but you're increasing the visibility of volunteerism as a priority in your church as well. So, and again, the same thing with the stage mentions. It's really important that you have a system for it. So how frequently are you going to talk about volunteerism on the different platforms of social media? So we're going to talk about it from Instagram this many times. We're going to talk about it from Facebook this many times, that type of thing. So make sure that you create a system or you create a schedule and that you employ that schedule, and that's the way that we're able to systemize it that way. The other thing that I would do too is I would make sure that just some like common things that your signage is good. So like it's okay to have a volunteer check-in sign in your lobby. Like, again, that's increasing visibility. Oh, right, there's volunteers who check in every single week, that type of thing. So like, that's a great way to do it. Volunteers wearing t-shirts, that say, like your logo, and then on the back, like, I'm a volunteer, or this is the best hour of my week, or something like that. That is going to be a visual reminder to everyone that, oh, those people volunteer. Like, if you walk into a building and everybody that is serving is wearing an orange t-shirt or a purple t-shirt or a blue t-shirt or whatever with your logo, and this is the best hour of my week, I love volunteering, it's going to consistently remind people, oh, this church prioritizes serving in the local church. So again, there's just a couple of ideas to help you increase visibility. The next thing that I would tell you to do is to get everyone on board. What do I mean by that? As ministry leaders, we are really busy on Sunday mornings. We don't have a ton of time to recruit people to our teams. And yet we all absolutely agree that a personal ask is the way to go. When I'm teaching at a conference, a lot of times I will say, raise your hand if you're here because someone at some point in some way asked you to serve, and everybody raises their hand. So we know the power of an ask, but the problem is that we have two people asking, right? Most of the time it's just staff or maybe the highest level of lay leadership. And those people are also the busiest people in our church. And so they don't have a lot of time on Sunday morning. And they don't know everybody. I mean, they may know a lot of people, but they don't know everybody. And so they're not going to touch base with everybody and offer this opportunity to serve. So what if we could get everyone, all of our volunteers, our entire volunteer base, what if we could get them recruiting? Now you're like, they're not going to have those recruiting conversations. We can ask them to do that. They're not going to do that. No, you're right. They're not going to do that. Why are they not going to do it? Because most volunteers feel awkward asking other people to serve. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to have a recruiting conversation because they've either tried to have one at one point, it didn't go well. And so they just like, not going to do that again. Or they don't know how to do it. And so they've never attempted to do it. But what if we taught everyone, what if we taught them and we trained them on how to have these recruiting conversations? So this last kind of point of getting everyone on board to have recruiting conversations to help you in your recruiting process, I'm going to give you a quick training that you can take this training back and you can teach it to your leaders and have your leaders teach it to all of your volunteers, so your volunteer base. The goal with this teaching would just be to train people how to have these recruiting conversations, to take away the mystery, to take away the fear, and just make it really simple. And it's 3 easy steps. Here's the training. Make a friend, make an ask, make the challenge. This is how we have a recruiting conversation. We make a friend, we make an ask, we make the challenge. The make a friend is easy. And the question that you ask yourself is to determine whether or not this is a friend is, do you have more information? Do you know more details about their life than surface level? If you as a volunteer, again, I'm acting as if I'm doing this training. If you as a volunteer cannot tell me something that's going on in their life, oh, their son has been sick, or oh, their mom it just moved to town or moved in with them, or this person just got a new job. If you don't know details like that, then that's not a friend. And so we got to go back to the drawing board and we've got to pursue relationship with people. But if you do know those details, if you have made a friend and you can say, yeah, that person's son just graduated from high school, or that person's daughter just landed a job in Los Angeles, or whatever it may be, then yeah, that's a friend. And so at that point, we've made a friend and we can move on to step number 2, which is make an ask. Now, the ask is not to volunteer. The ask is to pray. Because a lot of times we ask people, we want to go from 0 to 60. Hey, would you consider volunteering in our ministry? Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And the person's like, and it's like deer in the headlights. They're not ready for that question yet. They need to think about it. They need to pray about it. And so the ask, the second step, make an ask, is to pray. So you should say something along the lines of, hey, as I've got to know you and we've become friends, it just really, keeps going through my mind. Maybe it's God just telling me, but I really feel like that you could be an incredible part of this team. Would you mind for the next couple of weeks just to pray about potentially serving on my team? They're not going to tell you no to prayer. Like, they're much more likely to say no to if you just go straight to, hey, would you be on my team? But when you ask them to pray about volunteering, they're going to say yes. Yeah, I'll pray about it for the next couple of weeks. Great. That leaves the door open. Now we are making room for God to work, for God to convict, for God to move, and we get the opportunity to pray for them as well. So the make and ask is not asking them to serve, it's asking them to pray. Once we've done that, then we can move on to step number 3, which is make the challenge. Now, the challenge is the ask, right? It's the actual ask to step onto a team. And so when we say make the challenge, here's how I would probably instruct volunteers to do. I would say, hey, I know you've been praying for the last couple of weeks. I've been praying for you for the last couple of weeks. What has God been talking to you in your prayer time? What's he been saying? Has he been, encouraging you to join my team? Something along those lines. Again, they're not going to say to you, no, God told me not to serve on your team. They're not going to say that. They might say something along the lines of, I'm just so busy and I'm praying, but I just don't know how I can work it out, or I just don't know if I have the time. And then at that point, that's still an open door because they've not said no to you. So at that point, you said, okay, well, I'm going to keep praying for you. Would it be okay if I followed up with you in a couple of months just to check and see if it's a better season? And they're going to say yes to that. So we've left an open door. If God has been talking to them in their prayer time, you might get a yes. Yeah, I need some more information about it, but yeah, I'm interested in volunteering. Then at that point, our volunteers just need to know, okay, what's the next step? Do I take them to guest services? Do I collect their contact information and give it to my ministry leader? Do I take them right then and walk them to my ministry leader? Whatever it may be. But they need to know what the next step is if they get a yes. So that's the training that I would do for my volunteers. We want to get everyone on board to have these recruiting conversations. But we also have to understand that most people are not comfortable having these recruiting conversations. And so we need to teach them, we need to train them on how to have them. Make a friend, make an ask, make the challenge. And again, this isn't a training that you would just do one time. Hopefully you're doing this training through your emails, through your communication. Maybe you're doing it if you have a couple of training events a year, maybe you're doing it in that. If you have coaches on site, maybe you're doing it in that, in your team huddles or your team meetings. Maybe you talk about these steps, and you plan to do it, at least once a quarter, but reminding people that as a volunteer, it is also their responsibility to invite others to serve alongside of them. So let's just rehash real quickly about recruiting. Number 1, know who you need and how to communicate it. That haves needs is crucial. Number 2, increase visibility. We talked about t-shirts, we talked about signage in the lobby, we talked about having a plan for stage mentions and for social media. We also want to get everyone on board. We want everyone to be having these recruiting conversations, not 1 or 2 recruiting conversations by staff members every single week. We want 5, 10, 15, 20 conversations by our entire volunteer base happening every single weekend. We're much more likely to engage people when we do. So that is recruiting. Those are the keys to increasing visibility and to attraction to volunteerism. And so hopefully you can find that helpful. The last thing I'll just say about the onboarding process is that it needs to be simple. It needs to be straightforward, and somebody needs to own the onboarding process. Like that's really, really important, that somebody is owning it. So who is handling the protection processes, right? Who is making sure that they have a great onboarding? Who's handling the shadowing? Maybe it's one person per department, or maybe it's one person for your church, depending on your church size. Maybe it's multiple people in each department, but somebody has to be owning it. I call this person a volunteer champion, something like that. You could steal that terminology or not, either way, but we want to make the process simple, and we want at least 1 or 2 people that are owning the process. So onboarding needs to find full alignment in all departments, so it's not a subjective, that it's very objective, and that we have all of our processes written down. Recruiting and onboarding. How do we re-engage our volunteer base? How do we get more people plugged in? We recruit them well and we onboard them well, and it's very strategic. The last thing I want to close with is a lot of times we are hesitant to talk about volunteerism. We're hesitant to ask people. But I think you can probably agree with me that volunteering in the local church is an incredible experience for people. So yes, volunteers, they help us to execute our ministry. They help us to innovate our ministry. But even more importantly, volunteering in the local church will see life change in that individual. And so if we want them to experience life change, if we want them to take their next step in their faith journey, then we will invite them to serve. And we'll do that in a very strategic and intentional way with intentional recruiting, strategic recruiting, and very systemized and very logistical onboarding processes that see full alignment across our entire church. All right, guys, I hope this has been super helpful. Thanks again for allowing me to speak into your life and into your ministry. Have a great day.